Hi, everybody. It's the Spill the Wine Show podcast. Yeah, this is episode number 6, and I have to tell you, thank you for being so patient. Yes, we're getting this thing up and running. I think we have 6 shows. This is number 6 for the first 2 months, but this week we'll actually be uploading 3 shows. So I am right now in a place in Redondo Beach. Here we are, mid-October of 2021 already. Who knows where the time goes? Man, here we are, 3/4 of the year through the whole time. And right now, what I'm doing is, if you hear in the background what sounds like machinery, fans and what have you, yeah, it's refrigeration equipment, because there's a place in Redondo Beach called King Harbor Brewing, and a gentleman I met just a handful of days ago at Chapin Family Vineyards, fascinating as all can be. His name is Chad Hazen, and refers to himself as Chief Curiosity Officer. Now, the Redondo Beach location of this brewing company, he's involved with it, but it's not the beer that he brews, it's the coffee that he brews that I find so interesting. So, Chad, welcome to Spill the Wine.
Thanks. Glad to be on, and thanks for having me, for sure.
Well, as we were chatting before we got to sit down and looking around here, let's first of all let's describe the environment, because here we are. We've got a bunch of folks. You know, when you go into a bar after hours and you see all the upturned bar stools. Yeah, and wine barrels they're all sitting on.
Strangely enough.
But it's not the wine that they make here. It's the microbrew. So I see cans stacked everywhere and tanks for what you guys do here. So, Chad, tell us a little bit about your background. And as I was saying before, you know, it takes a heck of a lot of great beer to make great wine. All you have to do is ask any of the guys that work in the field or in the sticky, sometimes not so cool barrel rooms, what they prefer when they get thirsty. And lots of times it's not necessarily wine, but there's the business end of things. And I had mentioned people do like to drink coffee in large quantities as well. So let's dive in and find out what brought you to all of this we're talking about.
Sure, absolutely. So there's a couple of different aspects, I would say, in the background that got to this point. And first and foremost, I'll say I do not come from a coffee background whatsoever. My background is actually market research and brand consulting. So I did have a lot of clients in the past who made products, right? So I've learned a bit from them, from those kinds of things, but never worked in the coffee industry ever. So this is definitely something I'm learning new, and I'll talk about it, I'm sure, about that during this.
What about the beer industry?
So similar kind of thing. So the other part of my background is I've never worked in the beer industry per se, but I have been a beer nerd since probably before I was actually legally allowed to drink, to be perfectly honest.
We won't tell anybody.
I won't tell anybody about that part.
I never drank any wine before I came.
I'm sure not. Yes. Right. Yeah. So I mean, I've always been a beer nerd and have been home brewing since the mid '90s. Mm-hmm. So I was a home brewer for years and years, and started doing that again. Back in the mid '90s, kept doing it. Out here in California, there came an opportunity through a friend of a friend to invest in a new brewery, which of course is now called King Harbor.
Yeah, and let me poke this in there, because King Harbor, we're not far from San Pedro and the big harbor, LA Harbor and Long Beach Harbor. So yeah, I guess you could consider this in the King Harbor of Southern California, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, in fact, the Redondo Harbor is called King Harbor as well. So
good.
It's absolutely.
I did not know.
Yep, it's exactly. Yeah, we are truly about less than 2 miles as the crow flies to get to King Harbor itself.
So I interrupted you there.
Okay.
So continue on. That's great training. I mean, if you're going to get involved in creating product, you had some good background training from what you were doing before.
Yeah, for sure.
And you said you were in the media in part of that research. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so being in market research, so in fact, in that regard, a lot of my market research was working for MTV way back in the day, when they still showed music. So the M in MTV still meant music. I'm not sure what it actually stands for today, but back then, yeah. So so having worked, with a lot of media companies, I definitely understand, obviously how to market and the leveraging of media and what that can mean to a brand as well.
So that love affair with craft beer led you to this opportunity to be involved here with this microbrew. How long has it been established?
So we will turn 8 in March of this year. So I'd say it was about 9 years ago is probably when I first met the guys and decided to become an investor through that friend of mine. And but I guess having that home brewer background definitely helped me to, at least even when they were doing test pilot batches, to go like, all right, you guys have making some good product. I feel confident in putting some money with you guys.
So now I'm looking at, and let's grab one of those. I'm looking at, it looks like a beer can, but it's not beer. It is Sofee and a special brew. Talk about your special brew. Now, I have to also back up and say, so this was last weekend sometime. You and your brother came into Chapin Family Vineyards, and everybody who's been listening to me for years knows that's where I hang my hat in the wine industry. So I stay close to the fields and the winemaking and everything else. And you guys, knowing that you appreciate wine, we were exploring dimension of wine when the rest of the story came forward. So you have the appreciation of wine, which led to my discovering your craft brew, and then you came back in the door with this product.
Yeah.
How did that, you've already touched on it a little bit, but this is something very, very special. Let's talk about how'd that be conceived and end up in my hand in a can. I haven't cracked open yet.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. I'm definitely curious to get your take on it when you do that.
Okay.
So Sofee is the brand, which is short for SoCal Coffee. It is a carbonated cold brew coffee, so you might be already seeing a bit of a connection between beer and this product in that it is carbonated, as most beers are. So the short story is how I came about this was, it does go back to my home brewing roots, but again, home brewing beer roots. There was a time, I'd say maybe 8 or 9 years ago now, that I was training to run my first marathon. And, of course, when you're training for a marathon, you kind of want to make sure you're in somewhat good shape. So from that perspective, I decided I'm going to take some time off from drinking beer so I wouldn't be gaining, beer calories and all of that. And if I wasn't going to be drinking beer, it didn't make sense for me to be brewing beer at the time. But at the same time, it's a big hobby of mine, right? I like using that equipment. And I thought, well, gosh, what else can I make with this, homebrew equipment that I have? I knew a lot of homebrewers also made sodas. But then I thought, well, actually, soda's probably even worse for you than beer when it comes to calories and sugars and all those kinds of things.
I drink very little soda anymore. But there was a time in my life, I won't admit, but I used to drink a lot of it. But I was a lot younger. So,
right? Yeah, as we get older, it's a lot more difficult to keep that in our bodies, right?
Yes. It's not necessarily good for you in a lot of dimensions.
No,
so.
exactly.
Not that we have anything against soft drinks.
That's
right.
right.
Okay.
Just wasn't good for my training, I'll put it that way. So decided it wasn't going to make sense to do that. That said, I was a coffee person. I wasn't a coffee nerd, but I like to appreciate good coffee and all that. And knew I was going to be drinking a lot of coffee during training because I would be getting up at 5 a.m. to go for those long runs on the weekend. So I'm going to need some caffeine. And that kind of was the aha moment of saying, wait, why not just try to make like a coffee soda and, kind of combine those two ideas together. And I did it. I made it one time. I made a keg of it for my house. It was really, really good. And to be perfectly honest, I forgot about it. Just set it aside, didn't think about it doing it ever again, frankly, as an actual, business idea. But then fast forward another, I guess maybe 5 years or so at that point in time, and I noticed a couple things happening in the marketplace. One was that cold brew as a type of coffee was taking off, like wildfire.
Yes. And
it still continues to grow. And I was using cold brew even back then. The other part of that was seeing things carbonated, right? You have all the LaCroix, the bubblies, so the carbonated waters were taking off. Kombucha, that's carbonated. Now you have all these hard seltzers that are on the market. Those are carbonated. So you have all of these things carbonated that were really trendy. And so it's a pretty obvious thing. Wait, I've got cold brew that I was doing that's trendy. You've got carbonated things that are now trendy. Why not combine the two things, which I had already done, right? So figured that made sense from a market perspective to actually get this thing on the market as soon as I could.
Well, that's what really intrigues me, because I've never seen a cold brew with sparkling. Now, I'm going to admit to all you folks that love to, catch us when you are able, I on purpose, I've had a 4-pack of the cans that he gave me, took them home, kept it well chilled in the refrigerator, and I went, you know what? I'm going to put him on the podcast, and I am on purpose. I have not sipped this yet, so we're going to do this in real time. It's so phenomenally intriguing. Now let's take the leap from the intriguing to the curiosity aspect. Your cute little vehicle out here, which represents
Sofee Mobile.
Sofee Mobile. What is that? Little. What kind is that?
It's an HHR.
Yeah, there we go, an HHR. And he's got the whole logo and everything on there, but it says Curiosity in Chief. Chief Curiosity Officer.
Yeah, so that's that's my title, indeed.
Right.
Yeah, and then the tagline itself, which is on the Sofee Mobile, is "Coffee for the Curious."
And that, it worked. Because here you are with me trapping you with a microphone in this beautiful little microbrew here to talk about, in this case, microbrewed, cold coffee. Take that a little bit further. So here we are. You forgot about it, and what did that? How'd that splash forward?
Yeah, and in short, I think it was just that idea of seeing those two things together, right? The idea that carbonated things were becoming trendy and cold brew becoming very trendy. And the other part of that was I always thought being a beer nerd that my quote-unquote retirement career was going to be in beer in some way, whether or not it was opening my own brewery or just having something to do with beer in some way. But the explosion of craft beer over the past, decade or so from
huge competition.
Oh,
now.
absolutely.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I think the ship
like
has sailed,
the wine
frankly.
industry.
Yeah. So it didn't make sense to me to say, all right, I'm going to, to make that my retirement career. But I guess the next closest thing would be Sofee, right? I've got something that's carbonated. It does drink like a beer. In fact, I even carbonate it at beer level, so it doesn't have that kind of Coca-Cola burn where it's really carbonated. It's just it's carbonated enough to give you that refreshing mouthfeel, which is what I think ultimately differentiates Sofee from other products. Is that you think about coffee, hot coffee is not refreshing. Even like a regular cold brew, I wouldn't call it refreshing. It's it's cold but it's not really refreshing. So that effervescence of the carbonation lends itself to that.
So let's see. Here we go. Grab one there as well. We've got two different. This one is like me. I love pretty much traditional, non-flavored coffee. And so the one, what did you entitle this one?
That one is the Masochist.
The Masochist.
And that one is the most strongly caffeinated one.
That's
in
me.
short, that one, just so you have, so you're aware, 225 milligrams of caffeine, which is roughly 3 cups of coffee equivalent in a can.
Driving back down the freeway to head from here to Temecula, I don't think I have any problem staying awake.
You will not.
Just crack that beep. Oh, my goodness, it is.
It's some carbonation, absolutely.
Now, okay, because I'm a kind of a wine snob, and I like to drink things out of a glass. So you have right here, perfect. We have our little sipping cups that I would presume are the ones you use here at the craft brew, right?
Indeed, yeah.
Well,
they are branded.
They're beautiful glasses, folks. These are, you could put wine in here. It's like a non-stem glassware, and I prefer to drink these kind of beverages exactly that way. Oh my gosh, look at this. Wow. Wonder if you can hear it in the microphones. A little bit of fizz there.
And you'll see it even has head. It looks almost like a stout.
Now the aromas, it's, I love super double French roast is my favorite. And this morning, it's almost like my French roast favorite, but here it is with sparkling and with chill. So let's take a little sip. Wow. Yeah. It's almost like, I know you have one, you had the chocolate flavoring in it.
Yep.
This doesn't have that, but it's got such a richness on the finish. Since, boy, drinking coffee and microbrews and wine are so similar in all their dimensions. They have all kinds of nuances when you're looking at what are the aromas like, what's the color like, the body or the dimension of, what kind of guts it's got, right? And all of those things. I'm sipping this and going, gosh, there's almost like, on the finish, almost a little chocolate-like thing. And it would be reminiscent of what I'd think of like when I'm drinking a real big, rich Cabernet Sauvignon, where it has that kind of little lingering finish. But let's face it, this isn't necessarily designed to be sipped like wine.
It is not, no.
You could, since it's in a can, you could crack it open and go glug, 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 right?
Absolutely.
So,
and actually, I have many people who do.
So I find it here very... No, so what I'm curious... So some of the folks, if they've had a chance to listen to some of the podcasts, will remember Dale Pearson in the Pearson Brothers Winery down in San Diego. He has a wine that they make from honey. And one of the things we were talking about, because of the makeup of it, the different factor and some of the softness lends it well to creating actually mixed drinks. So would this possibly be something that maybe, I mean, you think about Jack and Coke and
absolutely.
Is the door open here for some coffee flavored crispy drinks?
Yeah, so it's funny you ask that, for sure, indeed. So one of the channels that I'm in right now is going into bars and restaurants. So there are a couple of high-end cocktail bars, for example, that are playing around with this.
Oh, that sounds fun.
Yeah, so there's one place called George's Lounge here in Redondo Beach. So they're doing a twist on a classic Negroni, and I don't know if you know what a Negroni is.
I do not,
actually. It's a gin-based...
I'm kind of dumb when it comes to mixed drinks.
Okay,
so.
yeah. It's
wine, but spirits.
yeah. Different thing, right? It's a different category. So there's a classic cocktail called a Negroni. I'm assuming, I shouldn't assume, but I'm assuming it's Italian, based on the name. But it's a gin-based drink with Campari, some bitters in it. So it's a fairly bitter cocktail. So they've done a twist on it.
The little bitter end that's notorious in coffee, I could see what that would match.
Yeah.
This has that, but in appropriate, because we've all had, you go into that coffee in the corner of the gas station, and you're dying for a cup of coffee, and you know better, and you pour it and go,
on the burner?
Oh my gosh, horribly bitter and burnt and all kinds of other things. So, so it's just like when we talk about wine. There are dimensions, like you can't have a wine that's overly acidic, because then it's off the charts. It's not it becomes that super tart, almost annoying, pinch on the bottom of your tongue. And then same thing goes on with coffee. When you haven't got brewed correctly, it's out of balance, right?
Exactly.
So I would imagine that's an approach that you had to play around with to get the balance for this.
So
correct?
Yes and no. I think one thing is that cold brew itself is a very smooth coffee. That's partly why I think it's doing so well overall, because it's hard to have that bitterness with a cold brew process. The way you're extracting the coffee out of the bean, it lends itself to a very smooth. So
talk some of the specifics of that, because I am just a coffee lover. I tend more to be for the hot, more plain type coffee, but I can enjoy love coffee and ice cream.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anybody knows me, I love ice cream. So with that process, can you kind of describe that? Because I have to tell you, I'm totally naive into what that process, how does that work?
Yeah, sure. So in short, if you think about the way we do most of our coffee, right? You're putting the grinds, the coffee grounds over hot water, right? From the drip coffee, that hot format can lend itself to some of that, that astringency or bitterness. The cold brew process is almost what it's pretty much what it sounds like, right? You are steeping the coffee in either room temperature or actual cold water for about 24 hours, and it just sits in, it sits in a basically big old bag, like a cloth, mesh bag. 24 hours later, give or take, you pull the bag out, and you've got what left behind is a very, very concentrated coffee that would be even more caffeinated than what Sofee is at present. So you do cut it down, a bit as well, because it is a very concentrated format of coffee. But
Makes
again,
me think of like when you make sun tea.
Yeah,
right?
it's
You just let it do its own thing.
Yeah, and the difference is you're
so
doing
it's supernatural.
Yeah, absolutely. But and the difference being that
gosh.
you're not extracting out of the sun, right? Sun is, and by definition, is going to heat it up to a degree. Whereas with the cold brew, when I'm making cold brew at home, I'm putting the coffee in the refrigerator for 24 hours, so it is truly cold brewed.
So I'm noticing right now, as I'm sipping this while you've been, as you see, I can't seem to put it down. I did have my cup of coffee, or two or three, before I left to come across the freeway from Temecula. Yes, well, we are a Southern California operation, but I'm equal opportunity wine drinker for all areas and any beverages that go with it from all areas. So this is very beer-like in the sense that the body of it and kind of the finish right now, like when you get into some of the coffee IPAs and so on, there's a lot of similarity there.
Yeah, like a stout. Yeah.
Yeah,
In fact, it's funny. Here at the brewery, we do have it on tap here, so we obviously have it in cans as you open a can.
That's fascinating. So I'm going to interject
Please.
on that. So I would imagine that might be when you were talking about going to some of the higher end bars and stuff. Is that maybe a potential marketing option?
There is a potential for that as well, and frankly, in office spaces, right? We've got a lot of people, a lot of these, I guess, call it trendier office spaces, like where the millennials are working. They like to have their cool perks, and part of that perk is having stuff on tap. Both beer and frankly coffee.
That I have not experienced. Where do you go to work where they have beer on tap outside of a bar?
like the Googles of the world, places like that. But
microbrew. Yes.
Yeah,
I
they'll
forgot
have
about
taps.
that. Yes. Yeah. I'm kind of being a little facetious, of course, but having a little fun with that.
And you'll even notice it even has like some the word you use in wine is the legs, right?
Right. So this is fascinating. Yeah, as you tilt it around and look.
Yeah, we call it lacing in beer, and it has lacing. Yeah, you see some of the lacing on the side of the glass.
So, since there's not an alcohol content in here, what the lacing, what typically might that be telling us? And I have to say, for those who know and love wine, when we start talking about legs and the lacing on the cup or the outside of the glass, it can be a misnomer. If the temperature is not correct, or you have a wine that's way too warm, all the alcohol will grab the side of the glass, and you're going, oh man, look at the body on that, look at the legs, and the wine's going, no, stupid, I'm too hot. But when the temperature is correct and in the right kind of glass, you can start to learn to kind of guess the alcohol content. So what are we looking at relative to that here with a cold brew?
Yeah, so I think in short, it is going to be a bit different, obviously, because of no alcohol, as you mentioned. So a bit's going to be giving you a bit of that indication of mouthfeel to a degree, that there is a viscosity to it.
It's got a creaminess to this.
Yeah,
almost. And I would say this for you folks, if you want to kind of imagine this, if you've remember the old cream sodas, kind of about mid-palate, I have a finish that almost makes me feel like I had a little sip of cream soda, which is quite yummy. So anyways, finish your thought there.
That's okay. Yeah, so you're getting a bit of the viscosity, right? So that's going to give you, as you mentioned, there's a bit of a richness to this. It's not thin on the. I don't think of it as thin, as the body goes and on the mouthfeel. So that's kind of indicating a bit of that, that viscosity that's there. That's going to translate to a bit of rich mouthfeel without being over the top, because as I mentioned, it's refreshing coffee, so it is overall pretty light.
So, since you're the creator of it, and we were talking about, potential cocktails, have you yourself, boy, this is a loaded question, have you yourself poured a little bit and went, I wonder what a splash of this would be like in it?
Yes, so I actually
So coffee and Jack or what?
So as you mentioned, Jack, it's kind of funny you say that. I did, and I did it for actually. I made a draft cocktail. So I ended up doing a keg of it.
Right.
So we took some Sofee, took at least I think it was maybe a fifth or 2/5 of Jack Daniels, added those to the keg of the Sofee, added some did some orange bitters, and added some bacon, a bacon maple simple syrup. And then called
Everything's
it
better with bacon,
exactly,
especially at the price of it right now. We
and
won't talk about that though.
Nope.
Okay,
and if
go
you think
ahead.
about that's okay. You think about what's in there. So you've got your coffee, you got your bacon, you have your orange, and I called it liquid brunch. So that was my brunch cocktail.
Awesome.
Yeah, and it's absolutely delicious.
So maybe down the line we might see some interesting configurations of Sofee in other dimensions. Is that possible?
Yeah. So the only reason I haven't put a cocktail in a can yet, which is also a very
You
trendy
get into
thing
legal
right now,
other kinds of things,
yes,
right?
I don't have the license for it
Right.
here, at the brewery. So so I need to get. It's called a rectifier's license, which basically means I'm blending. We wouldn't actually do any distilling here, but I can ultimately add liquor into this product, but I need to have the license to do it. That's the only reason I have not done it as of yet.
Well, you know what? You've been very creative to come about with this. Now, from the time you actually conceived, okay, I've done this, I like it, I think it's time to, turn it into a marketable product. Let's talk about that time window, because, it depends on what kind of energy a person focuses. But one of the things is people know over the years I've done with my Wine Country Talk radio show, and certainly here with Spill the Wine, we talk about the passion. What is it that drives people to be crazy enough to take these kinds of risks? It's not just anybody's going to go out there and go, I'm going to make a sparkling coffee and put it in a can and then try to market it.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah.
So touch base on that a little bit. You had a time frame there from when you went, okay, I've got something here, and it ended up with something you could actually take samples out and put it in the marketplace.
Yeah.
What kind of time frame was that for you?
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, so I'll take a half step back and then answer your question if that's okay.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Yeah, I think the reason I felt the need to do this was, I there was a time I mentioned back at MTV, right? I was working there years ago, and part of your job at MTV was to come forth with any sort of ideas you had for shows, right? If like, hey, if you have an idea for a show, let the development people know, and it's you're not going to get paid for it extra because your job is just to be do what you do. And as someone whose job was to keep my finger on the proverbial pulse of young people, recognizing kind of what they were into trend wise, what mattered to them. The idea of kind of the behind the scenes was clearly very important, and so I had this concept of. I think I had a name, like a working title of Before and After. So what the idea was that you would go to, the music stars, kind of where they grew up, their home, the house they grew up in, see what they kind of their roots, the humble beginnings, and then where they're living now and all their, pimped out places and whatnot. So the idea was considered like, no, we don't think it's going to work for their purposes at MTV. Fast forward another year and a half or 2 years after I've left MTV, and MTV Cribs is on the air. So basically, they took the second half of the idea and went forward with it. So there have been a couple times where I've had some ideas I think that have found fruit in the world that I didn't have anything to do with ultimately, and really decided that someone was going to do this at some point, and I just couldn't miss the opportunity to do it.
Absolutely, what a great, and so it's like. If somebody's going to do it, why not me, right?
Exactly. I would only have been kicking myself if I didn't at least try this idea. So then to answer your question about how long, I'd say once I decided to do the idea, it was within a year I had cans, samples ready to go into the marketplace. And I think within 2 years from the aha of let's do this, I was actually on shelves of supermarkets. Now, the bad thing is that I launched right when the COVID shutdown happened of March of last year.
I was marketing outside wine for Chapin Family Vineyards. I know that feeling. Right. It's like every door suddenly was slammed totally shut. And it's like, what do you do?
Yeah, yeah.
Had to take a time out.
You had to just tread water, right? Yeah. I mean, I was truly so Gelson's, which is I think it's 27 Gelson's throughout Southern California, was the first chain that said they were gonna take it, and it was truly supposed to hit their shelves like the week that the shutdown hit. So there were some delays, but on the upside, the good thing I was able to do, because I had all this product made for them, right? I had 27 stores I needed to have product for, and it was a delay. So I had it became fortunate in that obviously, hospital workers were working their butts off and still are to this day, but working long hours because of all the COVID and whatnot. So I was able to donate about $10,000 worth of cans to...
What a great way to get in the marketplace.
Right.
And this is perfect. I have to tell you, folks, I'm sitting here as he sees me. I keep sipping it. You know what? This reminds me very much of sipping a nice beer. Now, isn't that crazy, folks? You could grab a can, sit down, and sip it like you're thinking you're drinking a beer, and it's quite the opposite.
Yeah, and it's funny
because it's got lots of caffeine. At least this one,
right. And it's funny because I mentioned like having it on tap here at the brewery. I've had patrons here, who I've said full up, like, this is a coffee, and then they start drinking like no, but it's a coffee beer, right? I'm like, no, it's coffee. They're like, but there's alcohol, right? I'm like, no, it is coffee. But
now,
people
in
are
the future,
convinced.
that might be the case, but with this is not. So, hey, the radio thing in me is still popping up. Yeah, it's the Spill the Wine Show podcast with your host, Leroy Wine Guy Guilford. And yeah, in radio, we were always redundant. I know on a podcast, you can like start and stop me whenever you want, but you can't take the radio guy out of me, okay? So here I am with Chad Hazen, and as we've been discussing, is a somewhat revolutionary new beverage. I would dare say it looks like a can of beer, and yet it's coffee, and it has a lot of the same kind of satisfaction of sipping a beer.
Yeah.
That's really quite cool.
Yeah. Well, I think
I wonder what would happen if you're driving down the road and you're sipping one of these, and the officer pulls you over. You say, "Would you like a sip of my coffee?"
I have had police pull me over, but because of the Sofee Mobile, and they're just curious, like obviously the curiosity of themselves, like, and I've given them some cans to take with them. But it's fun, and it's going back to my beer roots. Part of that is intentional. This does look like a beer can. The artwork is meant to kind of indicate a bit of that same sort of vibe. In fact, even the naming, we mentioned the Masochist as being my strong caffeine. They all have names. So the Purist is my original one, the original black. I've got one called the Hedonist, which is orange mocha. And then I've got the Idealist, which is my Mexican chocolate flavor.
Oh, do you have one of those?
I do. Yeah, we'll crack that one open if you want.
I haven't sipped that one yet. Hold on.
And that one, that one.
Let me shoot the rest of this.
Sure, absolutely.
Like I said, I won't have any problem with being able to keep right up the wheel on the way home because, oh gosh, that's good right there.
Yeah.
Look, that's actually, you can almost... It looks a little deeper in color.
It is. It is a darker roast. And this one actually, maybe not surprisingly, because I said it's the Mexican chocolate version, this one does have real extracts of chocolate, cinnamon, and pepper.
Oh.
So a little bit of heat on it, but not.
Pepper
but, yeah,
as
a little
well.
bit of pepper. Yeah, because my Mexican chocolate is a bit spicy.
Okay. Oh, let me try. So, as I shared, I have on purpose saved to sip these right now in real time.
I'll partake as well of this one.
So this, almost to me anyways, even though we're talking about something that does not have alcohol, it has kind of a little dimension like a liqueur, at least to me.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, but the Mexican chocolate and with the cinnamon, you can kind of get the cinnamon on those, especially, on when we sip wines, and anybody that's done, I am not. So when I say this, I'm going to sound like I know what I'm talking about, but I know some people that do. When they sip like a whiskey sampling, you might have 5 different ones, and you'll have special glasses designed for sniffing. The way that the aromas emerge out of the glass, and there's a lot of science in wine glasses and now in beverage glasses, and you will find that certain kinds of aromas and effects on your nose are one way in the center and quite another way out to the rim of the glass. And I'm actually finding that with your coffee.
Interesting.
Not that like I said, not that I've I have a friend who's like a sommelier in every dimension you can have. Frankie Franceschi, and he's a water somm, a tequila, whiskey, beer, wine, and it's like 3 other ones.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, he gets up at like 4 o'clock in the morning, cracks open a bottle of wine, sips it, puts the cork back in, resets his alarm clock, goes back to sleep, and an hour later he gets up and he tries it again because he wants to see what does the wine develop like after it's been open. And he literally lives his life around tasting all kinds of beverages at various times of the day. That's what you call dedication.
That is dedication.
Frankie, if you wind up here in the podcast, yes, one day we're going to have you demonstrate that for us.
Perfect.
So where are we going now? You are in a handful. You'd mentioned Gelson's and a couple. And I'm hoping if I get my way, we'll soon have it at Chapin Family Vineyards because I think this will make a fun, especially for our dedicated, or what
the
do they
DDs,
call?
yeah,
the DDs. I got just the thing for you: ice cold coffee in the bottle. It'll look like you're actually enjoying a beverage. So, I mean, you do look like that when you're drinking coffee, but coffee looks. This doesn't look like you're drinking coffee.
It looks like you're drinking a beer. And I've had people say, like, I feel like I'm one of the people, even though I'm not drinking. I feel like I'm part of the group that's that's out and about, and not just a DD who's drinking a bottle of water or whatnot. Nothing. I'm knocking that, of course. There's nothing wrong with that. But
so I got to ask you because in this, with that little heart of the chocolate that pops forward, in all beverages, we kind of talk about the tasting timeline on our palate.
Yeah.
And this, right after that initial sip, all of a sudden, at least to me, right in the middle of my tongue and rising up into my nostrils, is that explosion of the chocolate and cinnamon. What about pairing? Food pairing, or dessert pairing with these? Is that, you don't normally think of a cold beverage particularly, well, I guess you do, because you could have a crispy cold wine and a crispy cold beer, and you pair those up. So has that entered into the picture yet? Thought about recommended pairings? I could see this being coffee, a number of desserts which you might want to sip with this.
I think, so I would say probably during a meal, maybe not, but except for breakfast being the exception there.
So they're coming to get us. So.
That is. Yeah, we are right near an ambulance station right here. So we have that noise once in a while for sure.
That's right. Shows them we're in real time.
That's right. So like breakfast, like pastry, right? Croissant, things like that. Absolutely. This is I think Sofee pairs really well with that. And then I think to your point about if as an after dinner potential dessert, there's some opportunity there as well. But I think it's mostly with pastry, or to your point earlier about ice cream, you can make a really cool float with that. So like a California affogato maybe would be the equivalent I would call that.
What a great idea! I don't. Oh my gosh, my wife, she's a crazy. She loves coffee like I do, but she's probably a little more dimensional in that because I tend to be a little more boring. I just like it plain and black, But I was just thinking, she has a friend who the first thing she does in the morning is she cracks open a Diet Coke. Here you go. She does that because she don't want to take time to brew any coffee, and she likes the cold drink. And this could be the answer. I say, well, instead of a Diet Coke, try some Sofee.
Right, yeah. And I think one thing that hasn't been mentioned yet, and for those listening, they might be thinking it's just carbonated coffee by itself, and of course with the flavors of, for example, the Mexican chocolate. But there is a bit of sweetness to it.
You can touch the little.
It's a hint. And it's I use agave inulin. So what that means is it actually retains the fiber from the agave plant. So you could almost describe this as a healthy sweetener, in that it does have natural fiber in the sweetener that I use.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because as I was sharing a little bit earlier, Dale Pearson with his honey wine was the same thing. There's some dimensions about the honey, and we all know honey has some incredible health properties in it that are retained in the wine.
Yeah.
Actually, on the finish, they do some adjustments, and they actually put some more raw honey in at that point. And this reminds me of that. This has got just a hint. I think you got a hit here.
Thanks. Appreciate that.
This is yeah. So at this point, you obviously have some, as we've already talked about, you have some options for coming up with some additional variety of product in the can, if you will. Have you ever thought, and this just popped in my mind, is it possible you might even do bottles? Would that be something that would fit?
Great point. I don't think I would in that. You think about even, I mean, that's different for wine, right? That, you know, that, I mean, 99% of wine probably is in bottle versus the, you know, I know canned wine's becoming a thing a little bit, but, you know.
Well, there's a whole mystique in the about drinking wine, especially with bottles. And to me, from a glass. But we were talking about this actually before we started recording, but the packaging is so much lighter and so much more convenient and easily recycled.
And
glass
the environmental
gets
pieces,
a bit encumbering weight and everything else.
Right, exactly. So for me, it just makes sense to be in cans. It just makes the most sense, to be perfectly honest. Now, the one thing I am considering doing is you know, these are 12-ounce cans, kind of standard cans. I may develop like an 8-ounce version, give or take, for the bar industry, right? Because they're you know, they're opening a can and it's going to go flat at some point, right? So if they're making a cocktail, which they're of course only using maybe 2-3 ounces of Sofee at a time, then having a smaller format for them might make more sense. But that's when I grow the brand a bit bigger to you know, to have that as an option.
Well, that's like, and actually before we started recording, we were talking about some of these things. When you think of sparkling wine splits, same thing, because if they open a full bottle, 750 milliliters, and only one person's buying a glass the next day, it's like, oh boy, we got to open another bottle. And the splits, boom, there's their serving right there. I don't have to worry about it, which is one of my ideas. They already exist. I mean, the big brands, the Gallows of the world, and so on, because they bottle gazillions of gallons of wine and market it accordingly. You can go into the grocery store and get the little 4-pack split. But I would love to actually have Chapin wine and some splits. Find out a way, and there is a way. So the process is already pretty much there for what you're talking about, because you already see in the marketplace these little skinny energy drinks, right? So that would be something. Is that something you're able to do? Because, let's talk about that. We didn't. The manufacturing of that. So you are actually, at this point, because your involvement with King Harbor Brewing, that you're able to manufacture the bottling process, if we will, canning process here, right? Would you be able to go to smaller sizes like that? Do you have that capability here?
So I mean, so the canning line, canning line that we use here, it actually is Sofee's canning line. I basically bartered with the with the brewery itself, so they can use the canning line, and in exchange, you know, they make Sofee for me without any, you know, kind of production fees or any storage fees and things like that. But the ability is, you know, absolutely can, because actually their beers are in 16-ounce cans versus 12 for me. So we can do different sizes, so it wouldn't be a hard thing. We have to do some retooling on the canning line, which would take, I don't know, 20 minutes or 30 minutes to get ready to go, but absolutely.
Wow, that is absolutely phenomenal. So I'm going to back up and revisit, because once again, that thing inside me that just loves the passion that drives all of this, all right? How do you feel about where you are now, with this launching out? Because, I mean, we talked about that process when the original idea came, and then it kind of, let's use this term, it percolated for a while.
I see what you did there.
And then once again you went, well, wait, maybe it's time to go. So how do you see the future on this right now? And where do you want to, I mean, all of us that create something, we want it to grow, right?
Absolutely.
Just like Spill the Wine Show, we're always looking at the numbers and going, boy, we hope more people are listening. I say we because my son Roland does all the production in his Monarch Studios in Carlsbad, and he's the guy that drug me into the 21st century, because me being an old analog guy. So that being the case, how do you see what you'd like to have come about relative to Sofee?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, right now, I mean, truly, I am Sofee. It is truly just me that this company is. I'm the only employee, I guess, if that's the right word to use as employee. But yeah, it is just me doing this right now. That said, I do have a distributor that's based out of Chicago that I could be national with them if I wanted to, but I'm too small to support that at this point. So
you got to have the volume of production.
Exactly.
Right?
So so I'm in 3 of their DCs, distribution centers, up and down the West Coast. So I do have product on shelves in 8 or 9 states now, including Hawaii.
Wow, very good.
So which is cool.
I mean, for a quick startup, that's really good.
No, absolutely. So and taking a half step back, so strangely enough, I actually lost Gelson's, so I'm not in Gelson's anymore.
Oh, okay.
But that was because of COVID, and I just didn't have a chance to do any support of the brand with their stores, and that's okay. In the meantime, I did pick up Erewhon, which is the trendy place of LA. It's kind of like Whole Foods on steroids, as I guess I would call it, as well as Lawson's. There's like 11 or 12 Lawson's throughout Southern California as well. So I'm in 8 or 9 states.
This is a product that has a wide attraction point to it, because I mean, I wouldn't consider myself a foo-foo drinker of any kind, but when you get into some of the Gelson's and stuff like that, they're very high-end.
Yeah, absolutely.
They have super meat and seafood departments and giant wine selection and all that kind of thing. But this is something that readily could be on all kinds of beverage department shelves. If
absolutely.
You ask me.
Yeah, I've got people who say they don't like wine, or sorry, you don't like coffee, who will actually say, "But this I kind of like. It's almost like a coffee soda, or it's a natural energy drink."
That would be a great way to put it, but when we say that, it would be more like a coffee beer, because it doesn't have that big syrupy and heavy bubble.
Correct.
It really does, to me, seem like I look at this and I almost feel like I'm drinking a really dark, robust beer right now.
Yeah. It's like a stout, but so and to go back to to where it's going to, where I would like to see the brand go. So I'm in 8 or 9 states right now, and again, and this is a lot of it's mom and pop, so I'm not in like a bunch of chains up and down the coast. So it's still just me doing this. So I should give you some indication of just how many stores I'm in total. But I am talking to. Through a contact of mine from my old career of being a brand consultant, someone in innovation at Nestle, and Nestle is not only the world's largest manufacturer of food and beverage, but they also have obviously they have a lot of play in coffee, and they're looking for something new, some new ideas in coffee. So I'm potentially be part of their they have an incubator program. So no guarantees yet, but I am talking to them. So that would be the next thing, is to have kind of that that sort of backing, again in a small way, to eventually grow with them.
I don't know the industry well enough, but I spent 40 years in the retail grocery industry, so I kind of know from the bottom up. Would this be a kind of beverage where the production of it could be like licensed out? Because we've seen that in the soft drink industry for ages. Different bottling companies are licensed to produce in certain regions and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think if this would grow, initially my thinking is to kind of try to replicate what I'm doing here with King Harbor and doing that bartering. And instead of shipping it from LA to New York, for example, if I grow to the East Coast, would be finding, and I do have a lot of contacts in the beer industry from my beer nerdiness, that I could potentially go to a brewery out there, have them replicate the idea, again, invest in a canning line for that particular small brewery, and keep it craft, keep it local. So that is a potential business model that I might incorporate.
That's great. All right, let's talk again right now, because we've got a good number of minutes under the belt, so we didn't want to burn everybody's ears out, but let's talk about King Harbor Brewing again, okay, because this is a podcast that predominantly at this point in time, I'm Southern California, San Diego, LA, my stomping grounds, the Inland Empire, Riverside, San Bernardino, and so on. But we're branching out further and further. So somebody's listening and goes, gosh, I'm planning a trip to Southern California for a vacation or whatever. I mean, we do get lots of that here, right?
Absolutely.
So, all right, so they could be coming from elsewhere. Let's talk about King Harbor Brewing, where they find it, and your couple of different locations, and then take the leap and talk again about Sofee, at least right at this point in time, if somebody wants it, where are the places they can find it?
Sure, yeah. So on the King Harbor front, like most of the small craft breweries throughout the country, we're pretty hyper local. So we do have a bit of distribution, down in San Diego County and a bit in Orange County, but for the most part, it's LA County and more specifically in the South Bay of LA. So you can find it at some grocery stores and the Whole Foods, the local Whole Foods, the local Costco carries one of our beers called Tiki Hut, which is our flagship IPA.
Oh, very good.
But for the most part, it's going to be local bars and restaurants and our tasting rooms. So we're at the brewery itself right now, which is where we obviously make the beer and make Sofee. And we have 2 other satellite tasting rooms as well that are both in Redondo Beach, where people can just come in and try our beers as well. And from the Sofee perspective, so the Erewhons, as mentioned, Lassen's, and just a bunch of mom and pop places. That said, I do have the online store, drinksofee.com. If I can make that quick little plug, where you can order online and have it shipped anywhere in the continental 48 states for $8 flat shipping, no matter how much you order.
Now that's a good deal. Because there's no way we can ship wine at that kind of price.
Touche. Yeah.
When one bottle is, we have a current wine, our Grand Reserve at Chapin Family Vineyards, and before we even put the wine in the bottle, it's about 1 pound a glass. So guess what? When you ship that, there's just no. I mean, you're either totally subsidizing or you're charging for the shipping. Yeah. So that's cool, and that's why these are smart packaging, because you don't have the tear weight, as it would be known, is pretty minimal, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It is pretty minimal, which is great, and it's part of the reason too. Is the being able to even show shipping to consumers. That's part of it, and also the idea of even shipping to other grocery stores. For the distributors to keep the cost down for them too. But
so I have to interject because I can hear some noise in the background. We are in a working brewery, folks. Yes, the noise is coming from the stuff that's got to be done for the beer making.
Yeah, he's opening the bay door, and I can hear him. I can hear him slowly doing it, trying to be aware of us. But that said, it's about 30 yards away from here, so it might be picked up.
Chad, thank you for your hospitality. This has been so much fun, and like I said, I just believe so many beverages are allied with one another. And in this case, I said that the leap is, yes, I'm typically all wine-centric, but as I'd mentioned before, most people who drink wine usually like other adult beverages, but coffee is one of those beverages that's still considered to be an adult beverage, but anybody can drink it.
That's true.
I remember, my mom would say, well, don't give it to your cousin, because he's too young. And I was like, I see kids all the time now drinking coffee at a really young age.
Stunt your growth.
Like there was something, that we weren't supposed to have in there. Like so. But once again, thank you, and so glad we got a chance to meet. This is it's been a pleasure. We will definitely keep tabs on and see how Sofee fares there in the marketplace, and encourage folks to, if you haven't had an opportunity to try a sparkling coffee, this is the only one. And I highly suggest go to the website again. What is that? Sofee?
Drinksofee.com.
Oh, spell it out.
Yeah. So it's Sofee with 1 F. So SOFEE. So.
And you said that stands for Southern
SoCal Coffee, short for SoCal Coffee.
SoCal Coffee.
Yeah, we do things a bit differently here in Southern California, don't we? So
yes, we did.
Carbonated coffee is part of that.
Guess what, folks? We spilled the wine. Yeah. Well, we spilled the coffee into the wine glass, because I have a wine glass here it's a stemless wine glass that we've been drinking it right now, and boy, is this yummy. All right, once again, thank you so much. It's been the Spill the Wine Show podcast, and we will be talking again to you very soon.